There's been a lot of chat about the role of deputy ministers after the president appointed the tourism minister to be caretaker, so to speak, of the health department while the Minister of Health is on special leave. Speak to us about what the Constitution says and what the limitations are in terms of having deputies step over to the role.
Thanks, Clement. So to start with, the Constitution is quite specific as to who can take over from a sitting minister, right? In terms of Section 98, a sitting minister can only be replaced by another member of cabinet. But the problem is that deputy ministers are not cabinet members themselves. Cabinet is only comprised of the president, the deputy president, and ministers. So in terms of acting for a minister, it makes sense, therefore, that only a full minister can act on behalf of another minister, which is why deputy ministers sit this one out, as the case would be.
So deputy ministers are appointed to assist ministers. Isn't it time then to change the law to allow them to play a more effective and meaningful role in cases where they need to step in and act on behalf of their ministers?
Absolutely. I think the first problem is the constitutional text itself, because within the constitutional text, it stipulates that ministers exercise executive authority together with the president. But it excludes deputy ministers from that particular executive authority, which means from a constitutional point of view, we first need to get the framework right and give deputy ministers that executive authority to act. In the absence of a constitutional amendment, we are unlikely to see any meaningful functions and assignments given to those deputy ministers. Yeah. And I guess it is time that the president actually uses the discretion that's afforded to him in terms of the Constitution, because it does say that the president may appoint deputy ministers, which is, of course, a discretion that he can exercise. And it's about time that he then makes the decision to say, since there is no meaningful constitutional function, for the time being, let them sit it out and not do anything, because quite frankly, there isn't much that they're doing without that executive authority function that the Constitution withheld from deputy ministers.
Yeah. The question then is, do we actually need these deputy ministers? I mean, they sit in cabinet as observers. They can't act in the place of the ministers. Some of them are reduced to cutting ribbons. Many of them, South Africans don't even know who they are. Are they really needed?
That's a good question. So back in 2016, we looked at an article where we basically explored the fact that deputy ministers accounted for about 70 million rand in terms of annual packages and salaries, right? But that 70 million can't really be accounted for in terms of specific measurable goals as to what they actually do. And you're quite right that most of the time they end up being ceremonial figureheads. If something needs to be opened, someone needs to show face, we definitely see deputy ministers doing that. But substantively speaking, they have no functions that they play from an executive authority point of view. And it is a waste of taxpayers' money to be spending well over 70 million rand for people that can basically not act for the principles that they serve. So it is time to relook that, especially in light of the economic situation, and see what we can do with that deputy minister portfolio. But without that amendment, like I said, I think it's about time that we get rid of them and save a bit of money.